I'm Darlene. I'm with SeniorLivingGuide.com. I work here as the National Digital Sales Director, but I host our webinars, and I'm also the host of our Senior and Caregiver Resource podcast, SeniorLivingGuide.com. If you haven't listened to it, please check it out. It's available anywhere you listen to podcasts or music, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, even I'll say her name and then she'll talk to me, is Alexa. And then it's a great resource for your clients and also for yourself. There's 62 episodes with a huge variety of topics. So we have that, and the SeniorLivingGuide.com also has print publications in North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, and Virginia, which is a great resource for seniors and their families, and also social workers and case managers utilize them to help decide what might be a good place as far as any kind of senior living housing solution or resource, and that's what those publications are intended for. And then we have our national reach website, which provides a lot of the same solutions, but on a much larger scale. And it's a great opportunity if you're trying to attract more clients or residents. Definitely talk to me because we may be able to help you out there. And then we also have hospital directories and I think 48 markets across the US. So we have a lot going on over at SeniorLivingGuide.com. So if you have an interest in working with us and partnering with us, we have a lot of opportunities. So that's what I do, and that's what SeniorLivingGuide.com is. And I'm going to go ahead and shoot it over to Kerri Shaver, who is with FitMinds, and let her introduce herself. And then I'm going to let her, we'll just go down the line. How's that sound?
That sounds perfect. Sure.
Perfect. Thank you, ladies.
I'm happy to start, and then we'll just go in order of the screen. So my name is Kerri, and I've been with FitMinds now going on 5 years. I am the National Manager of Sales and Customer Success, and I'll just keep it short with that. So go on ahead, Kara.
You guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so hi, I'm Kara Skripchuk. I am sharing a screen with Veronica Hoover because my Zoom was not being friendly today. So thank you so much for sharing, Veronica. I am the Senior Director of Memory Support Services for Erickson Living. I've been in dementia care, working in and out of hospitals, home care settings, day settings, you name it, for the past 30 years. And I'm really glad to be here and helping out with the team. Go ahead, Veronica.
Well, hi, everybody. I'm Veronica Hoover. I'm the Corporate Memory Care Manager for Erickson Senior Living. And I've been in the senior living business for over 27 years. My specialty is dementia and cognitive decline. So I'm happy to be here.
And that leaves me. I'm Amy Avila. I am the one and only Amy Avila. And I'm the Director of Operations at FitMinds. And when we had the opportunity of presenting a webinar, we really wanted to make sure that we tapped one of our best resources, which is the expertise of our customers. And so I'm so excited to present this with Erickson. Can you go next slide, Kerri? So a little, synopsis of what we're here to do today, right? We're here to talk about how kind of, strategic collaboration and that deep understanding of brain science can really have a great impact on residents with dementia. And I'll hand that over to Kara for Erickson to start going over the strengths and abilities and behaviors piece. So next slide, 2 slides.
All right, and you can just move on to the next slide. So hi again, everybody. So one thing that we talk about a lot in our dementia education is understanding, what your brain does and why it does certain things, and where the different abilities that lie. FitMinds definitely really focuses around cognitive stimulation, and that's very important because there's going to be places in our brains when we have dementia that don't work so well, and they're going to have areas of our brain that work really well. And so we really want to tap into those areas that work well because they help the other areas that don't work better. So to kind of break that down, I've given you this lovely picture to look at. It's a color-coded picture of your brain. You didn't know it was so pretty on the inside. But I'm going to start with the purple area of your brain. And for those of you that don't know, that's your frontal lobe. That's here, just right above your nose. And this is where all of your executive functioning lies. So for example, my ability to problem solve, my ability to reason's a big one. My ability to have a kind of a filter, you know, for example, what I mean by a filter is if I'm driving down the road and somebody cuts me off, but my son is in the car and I want to maintain what comes out of my mouth, I use my filter to block that, right? So if you have executive functioning loss, your filter is not going to work very well, and you're just going to say what's on your mind. So that's a good way to tell if somebody's executive functioning is working well or not. Another one that I mentioned earlier is your ability to reason. So your ability to reason is where you can have somebody explain something to you, and your mind can comprehend and work its way through of why that's being explained. When you don't have reasoning skills, you're going to have a lot of residents that are people with dementia that maybe they get angry very quickly because they can't comprehend and reason what you're saying. You're asking them questions, you're giving explanations, and that's just using their reasoning skills, which aren't there. So then a lot of times people get angry and there's arguments to start. So if you see, like, especially couples starting to argue a little bit more, I'm always like, it's not necessarily always about memory loss. Sometimes it's about those reasoning skills that aren't working very well. Doesn't mean that a person can't have a conversation. We just have to do it a little bit differently. Veronica's going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. The other thing that your executive functioning box does, it is also where your impulse control lies. So even though I am dying for a piece of carrot cake that's outside of my office right now, I know for my health and well-being and weight status, I should not eat carrot cake all the time, every day. So my impulse control is there to manage that. So if you have somebody with dementia that has loss of executive functioning, they will not be able to have control over their impulses, and it's not their fault. And if we say no and reason and explain why, oh, we're still using reasoning skills, and then their broken filter is going to say something that's not very nice to you. So those are all ways you can tell if the executive functioning isn't working very well. Moving to the red color of your brain, that's your temporal lobe. It's right above your ears, kind of around that area. This part of your brain is where your short-term memories are first brought in and then developed into long-term memories. So it's not that somebody has memory loss, it's more that they have the ability to not take a new memory and make it into a long memory. The bonus of that is reminiscing, because my long-term memories lie on the outside of my brain, not on the inside of my brain. So as you're doing engagement, the more you use long-term memories, the more that person will remember, because that's a different part of their brain that actually works. And so that can help the other parts of the brain work better. So you want to think about, it's mostly short-term memory. It's also about the memory of forming into long-term memories. All right. The other thing is your language box, and it's not that I can speak, it's comprehension. So right now, everybody, I hope, is hearing me, but that's a different part of your brain. You're also taking in the language that I'm saying, and your brain is calculating it and comprehending it. That's what this part of the brain is. So a lot of times when people have cognitive impairment, their temporal lobe, their frontal lobe, their executive functioning, their ability to comprehend language and short-term memory, that's all going to be affected. And that's not their best friend, right? So we want to kind of stay away from those areas, but use other areas of the brain to make it better. So some areas, which I'm sure if anybody on here is involved in engagement, you know about music. So music is the part of your brain that's way in the middle. It's a very small part of your brain. It's not where we hear music, it's where we comprehend music, comprehend sounds. That almost always works in the brain. So that is your friend. So if I was living with my mother and she had dementia and she didn't want to get out of bed, but I know she loved dancing to music of Elvis, I'm going to put Elvis music on before I say anything. Because if I tell her to get out of bed, that's reasoning skills. If I use my language to ask her questions like, why are you still in bed? That's language comprehension. Whereas if I just play the music, she's going to hear it. Her brain's going to work well. She's going to hopefully get out of bed because she wants to get up and dance to Elvis. And then we can continue on with having some easier conversations. And so then also you have the parietal lobe, which is the blue part of your brain here, which is your top part. This is where all your sensory stimulation lies. And again, that is an area of the brain that typically still works very well. So I can still smell, I can still taste, I can still touch, I can still hear. And most of the times, especially in the beginning part of people's disease processes, and even on to the later part, my motor movements still work. So all of those things are very positive. So again, let's go back to my mom doesn't want to wake up in the morning. She wants to stay in bed. She's awake, but she's laying in bed and not getting up. And we have to get up to go to a doctor's appointment. Well, one, I'm going to put on my music, but then I'm also going to go to cook some bacon in my kitchen, and I'm going to put a coffee, pour some coffee in a cup for her and bring it to her room. Again, no words need to be spoken. The smell, the music, the smell of the bacon, all cues to get moving, right? Using what the brain strengths the person has. And then to kind of summarize, or to finish this up, the green part of the brain I have here is that's where occipital lobe, which is the back part of your brain. This is where your vision and your balance lies. So people that have dementia, unless they have dementia from a stroke, typically they don't lose their vision, and their vision isn't impaired. So visual cues are 100% something else. So back to my mother who's lying in bed, but I'm kickstarting her day with some music, bacon, and coffee. I'm also going to hold up her clothes and say nothing, but show her the clothes as another visual cue. So I've communicated to her in 4 or 5 different ways as a way to get up in the day without saying any words, because I know that her reasoning skills and her language skills are not her friend, right? And typically, as I have it in green here, people don't tend to lose their sense of balance. And so that's why people tend to want to walk around. It's not that they're necessarily wandering and aimlessly. It's more that, hey, I have balance. That works. I'm going to use it. And the more I walk and the more I move, the more my heart works better, my lungs works better, and so then my brain works better. So this is why it's really important to keep moving, because it's a part of my brain that still works. So remember, the bottom line of this little slide here is that your executive functioning, the language skills, short-term memory skills are not my brain strengths, but I still have a lot of good brain strengths that can help me get along with my day. And Veronica's going to kind of talk into that. Here you go, Veronica.
Thank you. Hi again, everybody. So, Kara, thank you. That was a wonderful overview of the brain. So, as Kara said, we're going to talk about the brain strengths and the abilities of dementia. So, as we know, dementia impacts, just like you heard Kara say, impacts all the different parts of your brain. So, it impacts our cognitive, emotional, physical, and social abilities. So, again, exercising the brain is very important. It's just like a muscle. When you don't use it, you lose it. But exercising it is important because it helps brain stimulation. It helps you to think better, to clear your mind, and to do things that, to reduce that further decline of cognition. Okay. Next slide. Thank you. So we're going to talk about language and music. As you heard, music is the fruit of love, as Shakespeare said. And that's for a reason, because that part of the brain that's deep inside, little area, that the pituitary area, is where music is locked in. Not necessarily that you know the key, but when you hear the music, it takes you to a different place. And some of that muscle is woken up again. So music is very distinct of human characteristics. Also language. We've had, I don't know if you've experienced, but sometimes people in their moderate to late stages of cognitive decline, they tend to revert back to their original language if English was not your first primary language. Like me, I'm not sure what language I'm going to, because I speak 7 languages fluently. So that would be a challenge. But communication and language is key for that. So communication, it could be through writing, like Kara had mentioned earlier, if depending on the part of the brain that's affected. If somebody has aphasia, which is the temporal lobe damage, of course, you're not going to use a lot of words because they have difficulty understanding certain words, but they can still communicate through writing, through reading, and maybe simple questions like yes or no that require yes or no answers versus asking them a long string of, oh, what do you want for breakfast today? Instead of that, show them the picture. That's very important. We have A, we have B. They can point to it, or they can even write it down. So it is very important that we have that verbal communication in any kind of shape of tool, of the tools that they can use that can benefit them. Okay, the next slide. So our brain works in autopilot. Okay, very easy to forget. But at the same time, like I said, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. So it's important to keep our actions. And some of the tasks that we do might appear to be complicated, but if you break it down into little steps, it's very, very important to do that, especially somebody with cognitive decline, because that visual spatial processing is important for them. Okay, so tell us how you might look at object, you might be able to judge the depth and how far it is away from you. But somebody with cognitive decline, that is, it can be very taskful for them to judge how far that object is from them. So it's mindful that we don't assume that, okay, just because you're asking a resident to move from point A to point B, you have to look at certain things. Look at the floor pattern, for instance. Are you transitioning from hardwood floor to carpet? Because sometimes when looking at that floor, it looks two-dimensional. It looks like it's moving. So, and also simple tasks like tying shoelaces might be difficult because the dexterity is not as good as it used to be. Okay. And then helping somebody with dementia think about the use or lose theory, like I mentioned earlier. Practice, practice, practice. Next slide. So memory. The first thing when somebody thinks about cognitive decline, like Kara said earlier, people think it's just memory loss, but it's more than that. The executive functioning, the reasoning. Just like as she said earlier, once you start thinking, okay, person is arguing, becoming more argumentative, is all part of that memory decline. So the brain allows us to record certain information. I always say, look at, if you've been to the Library of Congress, it has millions and millions and billions of books in there. And that some of them are categorized. Your brain is that way, but the brain contains 20 times more than that. So it's a filing cabinet for facts and events, and you have to go in there to retrieve it. Okay, but memory loss is a major concern because it's using old and retained memory. So the filing cabinet is still there, but when you open up that drawer, it's very difficult to pull that information out. So our job by doing this programming and doing activities to stimulate the brain and to stimulate the memory is to help. How do we help lubricate that drawer to pull it out a little bit so that we can get the file we need out of it? Next slide. Critical thinking. So exercising executive function is very important for our frontal lobe, the front area here, okay? So as Kerri mentioned earlier, we use it to do different things like planning, organizing, concentrating, and reasoning. So stimulating the other parts really, really helps. It's not just one part, but the whole part of the brain. It helps to stimulate that with critical thinking. There are a lot of programming we can do around that. Again, that's why I love the FitMinds. It really encompasses that. You know, it's not just one part of the brain, if it's frontal or temporal or occipital, but it encapsulates the whole brain in helping residents with critical thinking skills. And to wrap it all up, brain plasticity. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Thanks, Veronica.
That was really good. So brain plasticity. This is going to be like a quick lightning round. We've got 3 quick questions that are kind of all pertinent to brain science. And these are the key takeaways from the talk that we want to use to kind of lead into discussing quality engagement materials geared towards cognitive stimulation. So brain plasticity, is it the concept? Does this concept mean that our brains adapt and change through life? True or false? Okay, we'll give you a couple of seconds, to answer in the chat. And Kerri, what's that answer? True, right? So it is that ability of our brain to adapt and change through life. The structure and the function of your brain changes throughout your life. A thing that we often think about in this context is we think about child development, right? That how in those very early years of childhood, their brains are explosively growing and building all of these neuronal connections and changing over time, all based on their experiences. And so this is something that actually we know now continues throughout life, that you maintain some degree of brain plasticity throughout your life. All right, Kerri, let's go to the next one. Use it or lose it. I think you're all going to get this one right because everyone's already said it. We will lose mental capacities, mental capabilities that we don't use. So they've shown it in studies where they took MRIs of medical students across, the span of a semester, and they did demonstrate that those studies and that concentration of learning did help them to grow gray matter over time. And the inverse of that is synaptic pruning. So synaptic pruning, that's how your brain is refining all the connections. And so when it's refining connections, it's very much a frequency, right? It has a bias towards frequency. So the things that you do frequently, it's going to maintain and strengthen those connections. But then the things that you use much less frequently, it's going to say, well, I don't need to spend that energy, on that. Same way that a gardener says, okay, I want this plant to look like this, and they may prune it in particular ways to help it grow in the way that it'll get the best function out of. All right, next slide, Kerri. Cognitive resilience. Is cognitive resilience something we're born with? True or false? Give the chat a second. Let's see if we...
Oops.
Okay. Well, that's okay. They're all excited, right? So cognitive resilience is a great way for us to build that dendrite density. So those connections between the neurons, the more connections there are, the more cognitive reserve you have, and the more resilient you'll be cognitively. And this becomes really important over time as your brain experiences trauma or impacts from diseases. So this is something we want to be really mindful of, is that if we're making a concerted effort to stimulate brains and stimulate our brains across all of the regions, right? Then all of the connections across all of the brain are going to help be maintained through the use it or lose it philosophy. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, so delivering cognitive stimulation. This is kind of our area of focus at FitMinds, is what is a great way to create systems that will help people have great quality cognitive stimulation that they can deliver. So we think a lot about how to do this well, okay? So we want to make sure, like we've talked about, right, that you have to treat all of those important areas of cognition in the brain. Those 5 areas all need to get addressed. Your brain, so many skills that you learn using multiple areas of cognition. And so your skills, right, are connected to all those areas. So helping you maintain those skills means you keep them longer, you have those strengths, but also you're hitting all of the parts of the brain to do that. All right, the other thing that's very important is that adaptability, because we want it to be accessible. And since you have people who have good days and bad days, especially, with residents who may have some form of cognitive decline, having a content product that, or even programming, if you design your programming in such a way that you can easily adapt it. Somebody's having a rough day, how do you make it easier, right? And this is the same philosophy that Kerri talked about with, okay, how do we set up all of these different sensory moments or all of these other, I can't think of the word, it doesn't matter, but anyway, all these different ways to stimulate the brain to get the same effect, right? So let's adapt, let's meet people where they are. The other thing that's important too also is to think about how varied, like that variety that you can provide, because especially if you're thinking about delivering cognitive stimulation in a group scenario, you want to make sure you're engaging everybody, and you're going to have people with such a breadth of backgrounds and skills and interests. So keeping your content varied does a really good job of keeping everyone engaged with the process. And the other thing we want to do when we're building good quality cognitive stimulation is thinking about the social connection aspect. Social connection is a key impact, right? Creating a sense of community is a very key part of cognitive stimulation, right? So it's not just exercising those brains, but it's also helping people come together and build their self-confidence and their trust in their relationships with the people around them. All right, next slide. Okay, so who else is promoting cognitive stimulation? Lots of people, basically. We've got the AARP, there's other researchers, all of these large groups whose job it is to look at and study these things have all said, hey, this is really impactful. And maybe everyone doesn't call it cognitive stimulation, right? That Global Council on Brain Health, they talk specifically about activities, but if you look at what they're saying, right, they're saying, oh, a quality activity is novel, has variety, and involves some engagement and challenge while still being enjoyable. So these are all things, like, this is the body of knowledge that's out there, is that creating something challenging for people that is always evolving is a key, like, integral part of maintaining our cognition. Next slide. Okay, so we've heard all about how the brain works, and some key factors into why, what makes good quality cognitive stimulation. I think it's important to remember that for us, what we prioritize is making sure that it's organized, it's formatted consistently, it's easily adaptable, there's variety. And we also, it's important to us to have the why, because these are adults you're dealing with, and they may ask, everybody has a bad day. I think that impulse to say, why am I doing this? Everyone has that impulse, we all have those days. And so having the ability for the people in the group to understand, oh, we're doing this to, create this moment, or to create this result, or to have this positive impact. I think that's very important to have. And a lot of this also, if you think about it, if you're putting it on a calendar and it's scheduled on a regular basis, this is all part of a routine. And we know how routine is so beneficial, right? Having kind of that comfort to people's security, and maintaining, addressing anxiety. So there's it's one of those things where there's like multiple layers of benefits. All right, and speaking of the benefits, one of the things that people see in case after case is that, right, their residents have less anxiety, that they have better self-esteem, because on a regular basis, they're seeing what they can do. The other thing that is a key benefit is, again, we're like maintaining, supporting their abilities and skills. And then finally, it's the social aspect, right? That another benefit is being able to connect. If you have, if you're in a residential scenario, right, in a community, the staff gets to see people at their best, and they connect together, and they're working together, right, to achieve these challenges, essentially. All right, so with that, I'm going to hand it off. Yeah, so I believe in show, don't tell. And now that I've told you, I'm going to have Kerri show you. So Kerri's going to show you what great content looks like.
That's right. I get to get into the nitty-gritty of it. So thank you, guys. All right. So group sessions. Here we've outlined the 5 key areas. I think everyone between Kara, Veronica, and Amy, they've all touched on it. So these group sessions are exposing your residents to mentally challenging exercises while also fostering those social connections. We haven't yet talked about making it a failure-free zone. So we'll look at, we'll continue to look at, making it failure-free and just really focusing on the abilities of the resident. Because oftentimes when you first start leading them in cognitive stimulation, they are really surprised at what they're still capable of. So having a full cognitive stimulation session, right, hitting those 5 key areas is going to provide a greater benefit to that resident than if you just focused on one cognitive area. So, if you just have a memory exercise or you're just working through some trivia, those things are good. I would never, I can't think of any exercises that I'd be like, no, don't do that. But it's about adding and making it more robust. So hitting all these 5 key areas with your content is going to really help to kind of fit that mold of what research has said can help slow the progression of dementia, right? You've got to hit all 5 key areas. So just touching on one every now and then isn't going to cut it. So we're going to look at these group sessions. So I believe Amy mentioned a couple things. So adaptability, but also structure. So you want something that's really structured, not only for your staff, but for your residents as well. So on the plus side, having that structure is going to help the team prepare for their group session really quickly and easily. So when I meet with different types of activity professionals all across the country, one thing they all have in common is they got into this space to build relationships with their residents. They love that engagement. So anything that can be done in a structured way to help them spend the majority of their time actually engaging in the group sessions is going to, really help make their job better and build, closer relationships. With the structure of a session, beginning with warm-ups, right? So I'm going to draw the parallel to physical activity, right? If you're going to do an exercise at the gym, you can't just grab 25-pound weights and start just crushing some, bicep curls. You have to warm up, you have to stretch. So for warm-ups, anything around long-term memory can really help residents have some early success in the session, which will help build their confidence as we go into some more complex activities. So it's a really great warm-up. Educating yourself on the why. So having that why piece to share with the residents. I know Amy mentioned it. There will be residents, there will be families, maybe just as a staff person, you're like, why are we doing this? So it's nice to have that, that educational piece. It'll help get buy-in from your residents too, because there are a lot of things when it comes to the brain science that you can share about the activities, and something may resonate with one of your residents. So for example, thinking about the purple part of the brain, purple is my favorite color. So, having that decision-making, that problem-solving piece, if that's something that maybe I as a resident internally have started to find myself concerned with, if I attend a group cognitive stimulation session and my activity director says, well, this is something that's going to help with executive functioning and decision-making skills, that is going to turn on my interest and hopefully help me to keep coming back and exercising my mind. Adaptability. So here are some examples of just a language activity that is presented in a harder or an easier fashion. So it's about, getting content that is going to work for your residents. So anytime someone is just starting cognitive stimulation, if they're unsure what their residents can handle, we suggest start them off with some easy content, okay? If you go through the whole session and residents come up to you after and they say, that was so easy. It's a much easier transition to say, you know what, you did a great job and I'm gonna make it more challenging next time. I'm gonna make it a little bit tougher. Then if you try the tougher route, and now residents who can sometimes be very self-deprecating, right? They're like, I knew I was too stupid to do this. I knew I couldn't do it. And they're already just like not into it because they think they can't do it. So when in doubt, start with the easier. You can always make it harder. In fact, as you're working with residents and doing this on a consistent basis, you may find the need to make it harder if you start with some easier content, because they're getting better at it and they're craving this type of knowledge and exercise. Yeah. So I mentioned failure-free zone. So one thing that's sometimes tough for people to get used to is responding to residents in a session and not focusing on the right answer. So we have to kind of retrain ourselves. Instead of saying, you got it right, or that's right, we say, you did it, good job, right? Because it's all about the effort we're putting in and the work that our minds are doing to come to an answer. That's the exercise. The right or wrong of the actual answer they come up with isn't what we focus on. So we just want to get them to think about the problem in front of them and come up with a solution. Okay. If you're leading it, I recommend making a mistake on purpose or on accident, whatever you want, but make that mistake, laugh about it, help put the residents at ease. It can be scary trying to give answers if you are already nervous about saying the wrong thing or getting something wrong. Here's another example of some harder and easier content. So this is a visual spatial activity, really great for challenging the part of the brain that helps orient time and space. So on the tougher side, or the harder side, the challenge for them is to find this pattern, and they have to make a lot of decision points in order to get from 1 to 2. On the easier side, the amount of decision points is greatly reduced, right? The pattern is more clear to be seen. That's just, again, an example. This type of cognitive stimulation programming, it's got to change all the time. If we just did these type of patterns, we'd only get good at like finding patterns, right? That's not the point. We have to just keep exercising the visual spatial part of our brain with different types of activities. Here's just some final examples. So content overall, we really focus on the dignity. I know Amy mentioned these are adults, so we don't want them to feel like, you know, there's anything preschool-like or cartoony. You know, a lot of it depends on your resident population and what they enjoy, but trying to keep it very adult is going to help everyone feel successful and like they did something, you know, really great in their day. Computation on the left-hand side, that's an example. It's number patterns. Next time, maybe you're going to do word problems. Maybe you'll solve equations. Sudoku is very popular, right? So, but all those different types of activities work different parts of the brain. So if you're doing solving equations, that's going to focus more on the cerebral hemisphere, whereas a clock face word problem, that can engage your prefrontal and front parietal regions. So again, that's why variety is so key. In the middle, we have an example of a language discussion. So I know both Veronica and Kara spoke about reminiscing, right? It's a wonderful thing to do when we're talking about having group sessions. It's a great opportunity to learn about things that are important to your residents, other things that they've experienced, knowledge that they have that they can share with you, right? There's so much out there that people can know, and to be able to teach someone something is a really dignified thing and truly one of the most enjoyed parts of a cognitive stimulation group session. And then lastly, I know we talked about music. Ending a session with some music that you know that they enjoy, that is a great way to finish a session. I've talked about we want to really focus on what we're still capable of. So anything positive, right? We have some affirmations here. I would dare anyone to say one of these out loud. You automatically feel good. Like it's just a reminder of the good things. I myself could benefit from just saying one of these to myself on, during a rough day. So any way that you want to really finish a session on some positivity to help us go into the rest of our day, just feeling really great and accomplished. Pictures are worth 1,000 words, you guys. We all know that. So here is a group of assisted living residents. I said I was from the Tampa Bay area. They are in my area. So this is something I actually got to witness. And the group of residents came in. At this point, they've been doing it for a while. But what I loved was at the beginning of the session, they reminded themselves that like, what happens if FitMinds, or, what happens here stays here. So they kind of set their own safe space. And there was a lot of laughter and a lot of fun with this group. I mean, you wouldn't think that they were doing like, tough exercises. They were just having a blast. So adding cognitive stimulation to your programming is going to really elevate it. I mentioned once your residents start, they're really going to start to crave this type of activity. And they're like, when are we doing that again? We should do that again, because they just feel so much better. If it's something that your residents struggle with putting pen to paper, it can just as easily be led up on a screen, and residents can just be sharing things aloud. Okay. So a couple of other testimonials, but we're coming to the end here. So I just want to finish by saying implementing cognitive stimulation means having a bigger impact on your residents' brain health. You're leveraging what you know about brain science, learning more yourself, sharing it with your residents, supporting the staff with these tools and resources to enable them to provide it consistently, and then allowing for that resident and staff connection. So I hope that answered a lot of questions. I know we talked a lot about what it was, and then we got to see a little bit about what it was. So I will go to questions now. We're back to Darlene, I should say. You're on mute, Darlene. Darlene, you're on mute.
Nobody puts me on mute very often. So. Anyway, I just wanted to say, first of all, I'll let some people, if they want to get some, I don't have any Q&A in here as of yet. I've had a few comments, which I'll take a look at, but I did want to say, you and I chatted a little bit, Kerri, and I wanted to mention that just in case, folks are looking at this is not just for those already in cognitive decline. One of the things that I really liked about this is one thing that we talked about is it's good for everyone. Just to keep, like going to the gym, keeping your brain healthy before you need it. So, just to kind of mention that's one thing that we talked about, and to the folks that are on the webinar right now, that's something that all the residents can use, or the clients, if you're working in home health care or whatever the case may be. It's something that everyone really can use, especially as we age. The older I get, the more I feel like I'm looking at these and starting to maybe make sure that I can do them. So as you're putting
they can be tough. And that's where I really give a lot of props to Erickson. When we started working with them, they use this programming with all levels of their care. So, I mean, I won't speak for them, but they did. And I was like, that's so great, because so many people are so focused on, just the people with, whether it's a diagnosis or showing signs.
Yeah. So I have a few questions. One is, have the programs been vetted through the lens of diversity? Not sure.
That's an interesting question. I guess one of the things maybe to be mindful of is that the way the program is designed, it's designed in terms of breadth, right? If we're hitting all of the different areas of cognition, then people with different impacts to different areas of their brain are going to get something that they need out of it. I think the other thing maybe to think through in terms of diversity, especially if you're thinking about like social determinants of health, is that's something that is going to be very much will depend on communities, right? So the composition of your community, it's going to have a huge impact. And so designing a product, it's one of those things where that's where the adaptability of the product is going to be key. So if you have, I know a thing that we do often is we support our customers with like brainstorming sessions. So if you have, we would do like a brainstorming session. Okay, how can I help this person with this background, with this problem? So that's how I guess we address diversity.
And then one that I wanted to, okay, can I post the link to the podcast? Yes, I'll do that. And are we going to email the slides? So we'll email the link to the podcast or to the video, and we'll review whether we'll send the slides out. so we'll let you guys know on that one. So do certain foods provide positive stimulation?
I'll go ahead and touch on that one. Yeah, definitely. That's for sure. We talked about, you know, the ability to smell and taste. And so if you think about it, like I'm from Nebraska, right? So every time I have corn on the cob and steak, I'm immediately brought back to my childhood years. Or if I have a roast with carrots, that's childhood years from where I grew up. And so then I have positive memories from the food that I'm eating, and I have positive thoughts, and everything just kind of makes me feel good. So absolutely, food and the taste of food can really provide very positive stimulation. You know, if you give me a food I don't like, that's not going to be very positive, right? Or if I have a negative memory, like my son, I made him eat raw broccoli when he was a baby, and he spit it all out, and now he's like, oh my gosh, broccoli's like poison to me. He has a negative connotation to it. He's getting better at it, by the way. But yes, food definitely, especially for somebody with dementia, that can relate. A birthday cake's going to be a celebration. I'm going to be positive. You know, food is related to memories, so it is positive.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely love that, because it really is. Even like during the holidays, certain foods during the holidays are very nostalgic, and you only eat them during the holidays because otherwise they're no longer special. So, okay, so let's see. So one of the questions is, so one of the sessions in the example, how long would that program typically last? Brittany asked that question.
So our program can last anywhere from 35 to 45 minutes. A lot of it just depends on the amount of residents. I mean, I'd be interested, you know, to hear what Veronica has to say as someone, you know, in it. But when we present them, that's kind of the average time. Do you find that to be true, Veronica?
Absolutely. In most of the communities I've been to, yes, usually they do 30 minutes to 45 minutes. They might break it into 2 sessions where they do 30 minutes, and then after dinner or after lunch, they go back and do another 30 minutes. Yeah. So I think the time is very important as well, because you don't want to flood them with too much information. So 30 minutes, 45 is very ideal.
Yeah. Well, we saw some of the exercises. I mean, it's tiring doing all the thinking.
Yeah.
And then one of the questions Sonia asked is where she can pick up where the materials can be found. And I'll let you go ahead and answer that. But basically my understanding is I'll send your contact information and they can reach out to you for that, correct?
Yes, that would be great.
Okay, so I answered it. I keep it short and sweet. So yeah, so that information, contact information, etc., and actual website link to FitMinds, I'll include that as well. Then we had, I see. And then I have, what other suggestions can you offer in order to convince the client's family that the loved one is showing signs of dementia? That's a hard one.
Go ahead. Well, their families are always sometimes the last people that want to admit that. And it could be due to they're embarrassed, or they just don't know, or they just don't understand what's going on. So leading them into that can be difficult, but it's not impossible. So what we need to do, first of all, is talk to them about, what have you noticed that's different about your loved one? What did she used to like that she's not doing anymore? It could be somebody who used to be very keen about the way they dress, and all of a sudden you come and visit them, they're no longer, look unkempt, their hair is disheveled. That is a sign. Have you noticed any of these signs? Don't tell them what you've noticed, but rather have them come to that reality and say, well, mom used to love to go out and hang out with her friends. Now she's staying at home a lot, and she's peeping through the window, and she's talking about the neighbors coming in and taking stuff from her, et cetera, et cetera. So look at the cognitive change, and also look at some of the physical changes that's going on, and have them come around and talk to you about that instead of you telling them.
Yeah, absolutely. My dad had dementia, and one of the first things he said, and this was long before he was diagnosed, and it hit me weird, and honestly, I ignored it, is he said to me one day, he said, have you ever been like sitting at a spotlight or at a stoplight and looking around and not knowing where you are at?
Mhm.
And it being not very far from where you live. And in the town we lived in our whole lives in Orlando. And I'm just like going, I said, no, Dad. And then I remember thinking, oh my gosh, that was like red flag. But I didn't want to acknowledge, I did not want to acknowledge it was happening. So it can be really hard for families to acknowledge because it's not a path you come back from. So let's see here. So the next question was, who developed this program and how long has it been practiced?
So this originated in Canada. So not surprisingly, the United States has some catching up to do. So the UK, Canada, they've been really focused on group cognitive stimulation since 2010. So Canada developed this and the United States here started doing it in 2017.
Okay. And then Liz asked, can the 5 parts be broken up throughout the day or do they all need to be included in each session?
Yeah, Veronica touched on that a little bit. So we do have a lot of communities where sitting down for even 30 minutes is too much for their residents. So again, just taking that structured content and using it, piecemealing it throughout the day has been really successful for a lot of communities using it in that way.
Okay. And I think I'm going to read this. I think it's the same question, just in a different way. Would you break the program up with brief videos or music between the warm-ups and exercises? Also, so sorry about all the questions, but how would you word this programming on a calendar for families? Whole program as one special name, break the programming up at different times with different names, question mark.
So I'll answer that just because we have it in practice, right? Sorry, but I'm just gonna like
We're taking this one.
We're taking this one. So, especially in the beginning part of people's disease process, our day programs, they definitely play music in between because the music is a part of their brain that works, so it kickstarts it to start working better so it can accept the cognitive stimulation that the program is going to offer. It works wonders and it's amazing. We've done it where we don't have music and people can still complete the program, but then when we play the music before, they can complete it so much better. So again, it's just like you're making those synapses in the brain keep working and working, and the more that happens, the better it works. And on our schedules, we just have it listed as FitMinds because we want our loved ones and the family members and our residents to understand that, hey, we're doing exercise, but it's of the mind. And so we want them to understand that cognitive stimulation is very important. So on our schedules, it's pretty easy. FitMinds.
Gotcha. Very good. Let's see. I think I have another. Who is qualified to administer this program when using?
Anyone. So we set it up in a way where any staff, caregiver, volunteer, anyone that's interested in spending time with the residents and facilitating this, we, being FitMinds, will spend some time with them to walk them through it and help give them some tips and guide them in leading a successful session. But in the end, it relies on that relationship between that professional and their residents. So that's why I say anyone. It's like, oh, you know your residents best, so they're going to be able to execute it way better than any outsider could. So it's really just about getting them used to that content and letting them go to it.
Okay. All right, I'm going to take one more question and then we are at the 3 o'clock hour. Any additional questions, you can definitely reach out directly to Kerri. Have you ever worked with home care agencies yet? That's an excellent question.
Yes, we absolutely have. So we support home care agencies here in the Tampa Bay area, helping educate their staff so they can do more with the clients that they spend time with.
If they're not in the Tampa Bay area, can you still reach them as well?
Absolutely.
You can do it virtually, correct? Because I know that, we've talked about that before. 2020 made everything very accessible,
right?
In the virtual world.
Right.
And I'm going to add our home support staff here. They have borrowed the FitMinds from our day programs, and they take it into residents' apartments that are living independently, and the home support staff do complete those particular programs one-on-one with the resident, and it's great.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
That's awesome.
So apparently there was a lot of questions going into the chat, which I didn't see because the chat wasn't adding additional, yeah, apparently the chat wasn't adding, and it wasn't highlighting that there was any additional chats going in, because the Q&A was letting me know this was not. So,
Well, I'm certainly happy to answer questions.
Yeah.
My email address is here. You can call. That's the direct number to FitMinds. I don't know if there's another way you want to handle it, Darlene, but I'm happy to get back to people via email or schedule a time to discuss it further with them.
yeah, and actually I think I can export the chat as well. So I can go ahead and do that as well. So,
Cool.
but yeah, absolutely. This has been a fabulous webinar. I thank all of you ladies for joining us and sharing your expertise and something that I think can absolutely be a game changer for the residents, for our seniors, for their families, and for the future in dementia care. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. And everyone, thank you for joining us on this webinar, and we look forward to the next.